Bless up, everybody. Yannick Reed here, and welcome back to the One Par podcast. You know what I mean? It's a podcast where I, your host, Yannick Reed, will bring you into some niche topics about culture, creativity, technology, and just overall Jamaican lifestyle. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, big up yourself. If you are listening on any of our audio platforms like Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time. This is our second episode, and our first episode, there was a lot of positive feedback. And I'd just like to say so much thank yous to everyone who took the time out to listen to the full podcast, first of all, and big up everybody who took the time out to watch the snippets, engage us on social media. I'm really excited to know that, there's an audience, there's a community that is willing to engage together about topics of this nature. So without further ado, we're just going to get into our second episode. So for this week's par, it's definitely taking an offshoot of our first episode and the feedback we got from the first episode. So if you haven't listened to the first episode, you can take some time to listen to the first episode and catch up. But if you didn't, trust me, you'll still be able to understand what we're talking about today. Last week, one of the topics we were kind of just talking about, I was responding to another podcaster's take about his ideas and reggae being fun and just the enjoyment within reggae. And one of the things I was kind of breaking down was reggae's relationship with dancehall. So one of the comments that I received on social media in response to that, a person said, reggae has gone uptown. And it's not the first, second, or third time I'm hearing someone say that. So I want to take on this topic in earnest, because I've really been breaking it down and thinking about it to say, okay, where is this coming from? And before I even dive into the reggae gone uptown bit, I started to think about just how uptown and downtown, or uptown and ghetto, I'm not a big fan of referring to things as ghetto, but bear with me. But uptown and ghetto, it has just become this binary, meaning if you're not coming from the streets, you're uptown. So me personally, I would personally classify myself as middle class. I think I have grown up in what would be considered a middle class experience. I lived in a good area, but there's definitely many tiers of higher class above me. My parents didn't drive the newest car, but at the same time, I didn't want for anything. I always had my uniforms, I always had my books. My parents were educated, and I was able to complete my education up to a tertiary level without great struggle. So to me, that's like a middle class experience. It's not like I had wealth, but I definitely would consider myself well off. But I always notice that interacting with persons who were not in my class, or who were below what maybe I would consider middle class, or people who would perceive themselves to not be in the same class as me, they would look at me and say, yo, you're uptown boy. And I used to kind of argue with it, but I don't argue with it much anymore, mostly because I can understand why they would come to that conclusion. It's like if you are in a class below someone, your understanding of the levels of classes above you may be limited. So even what I might consider somebody, maybe I call somebody uptown, they're like, boy, bro, there's way more uptown than me. So I think it also works in the inverse, whereas, somebody who may wake up and, them have to share them backpack with them sibling, or they don't know where their next meal is coming from immediately, them can look at me, who I didn't have to go through those things, and say, yo, bro, you're living at a lap of luxury. You're uptown. So understanding that binary, I see where that binary now has come to music, and we're getting closer to the reggae gone uptown thing. Because I feel like, for better and for worse, is that especially Jamaican music has this inseparable tie to the streets. Like Jamaican music and the streets, them have a very tight-knit relationship. It's one in the same for dancehall, and I think it is still very much so present in reggae, but just overall, yeah, the Jamaican music, it feels necessary that you have to have a relationship or co-opt the streets. And I want to reiterate that I don't necessarily want to start off with that being a bad thing. People might see it and say, oh, I'm bashing it, because I personally believe, as someone who is not from the streets, that the streets is basically the nucleus. It's where Jamaican creativity primarily comes from. Like Jamaican creativity, it is the purest form of Jamaican creativity, authenticity, all of that, meaning all of the popular slangs come from the streets. All of the popular dances come from the streets. A lot of the fashion come from the streets. And a lot of the artists have come from the streets. So Jamaica is not the global brand it is without the streets. So we could just make that clear and make that known, say, we acknowledge, say, the streets is important. What I would say now, when somebody made that comment, right, they were saying reggae gone uptown. I keep playing it over and over in my mind, and it just made me think about like a myriad of things. You know, growing up, you know, being in music and being adjacent to music, observing, I realized, just like I was saying, is like you have to co-opt the streets no matter what kind of music you do. So if you're, say, a youth from middle class, and you want to do dancehall, and I'm just gonna speak very straight and plainly. You know, I would see young men who are not from the streets, who want to enter into reggae or dancehall at the time. They would often have to go to a garrison or pretend that they are from the streets. You know what I mean? So there's always this costume that they would have to put on, you know, like this costume of badness, this costume of we come from the streets, just the whole bad man aesthetic, you know? And I know, and people know, maybe not the masses, we know that you come from somewhere that would be classically viewed in a Jamaican sense as uptown or outside of the streets. For some people it work, and some people it don't work. I always found that interesting, and that's now when I come to this reggae gone uptown thing, and we're just breaking it down on a couple levels. When them say reggae gone uptown, I think, reggae's origin is the streets. I think that's a fact. I think we can acknowledge that that is a fact, that, you know, the sound and the culture come from the streets. If we say reggae has a presence uptown, is it that we're saying that reggae has left the streets? And if someone wants to say if reggae has left the streets, I want to ask, who is responsible for that? Because I would like to imagine that anybody from any class should be able to make music. That's how it should work, right? Meaning, if there is a bad reggae artist from the streets, you know, just come from the streets and build reggae from the streets, no so? Is it that no, you can't do, is it that what people are saying is that you can't do reggae unless you're uptown? Because we have to break down the statement, you know. And that's what we're going to be doing on this podcast, is that we're not going to be intellectually lazy. You know what I mean? What I understand that people are trying to imply from the statement is that everybody who is successful in reggae is uptown right now. And I want to insert an element into this discussion that when we are talking about uptown and downtown a lot of times, it's usually in the context of Kingston and St. Andrew, meaning who live in uptown in Kingston and St. Andrew, or who come from the streets in Kingston and St. Andrew. Because I find that we leave out country. Because when I interact with people who are not from Kingston, St. Andrew, or let's add St. Catherine, is that they don't think in the binary of somebody is uptown or downtown. Is that they have it, like you have uptown Mandeville or you have uptown part of Mobe, but country people will just say, yo, I come from Mandeville, or I come from Senti, or I come from Trelawney or Bay, you know what I mean? And then we'll probably even say the city or the community that them come from. But I noticed that binary that Kingstonians like to apply to things, it is not so present in the thinking of people outside of Kingston. And why I think that's important, and if I may defend the people, because I have information that allows me to kind of know certain things. Protege, he come from St. Elizabeth, he come from Santa Cruz. Yes, he is light-skinned, but he is not from Kingston. Maybe, yes, people would, when him come down and he's successful, they would categorize him as uptown, but he's a countryman, you know what I mean? Leila come from Christiana in a Mandeville. As far as I know, Christiana is not uptown. You see me? Mortimer come from Senti as well. Samori come from Kenkat. You know what I mean? Chronics come from De La Vega, Spain. Like one of the top 3 most street areas in Jamaica. You know what I mean? And if memory serves, Jesse come from Montego Bay or St. James. So a lot of those names I've listed, they're not everybody. They're not every reggae artist, of course. But I feel like I understand that that's who people are referring to when they're talking about it. So most of these people are not coming from Kingston. So I ask again when people say, reggae gone uptown, what do you mean? Because, again, not allowing the discussion to be intellectually lazy. So we can establish that these people that I just listed, a subset of who I feel like people are talking about, they are not from what we would consider uptown. Like, if me go to my school, they go Arden, uptown school, all of those people, except probably Chronics, because we don't classify Spanish Town as country, everybody would have said, yo, a country them come from, or streets, country or streets. So they would not be classified as uptown. So I'm sure a lot of arguments can agree that we're currently on the same page. Okay? So people in the streets can still make reggae. The people who them say I control reggae right now, they may come from uptown. I will entertain the discussion in good faith. Them can probably say, oh, but them uptown. No. And I would not argue back in that. Probably, of course, sure. But in a way, if you are successful at music, right? Wouldn't you be trying to perform upward social mobility? That's what I would imagine. So even if I go over to dancehall, and yes, I can understand the difference where a man might say, Popcorn is still in the streets, you know what I mean? They might say a lot of these artists still in the streets, you know what I mean? Them still popping in the streets. But enough of them, Monday, when they get their wealth or their success, they move from the garrison. And I understand, or I would understand, that most people from the streets do not want to stay there, or they don't want their offspring to stay there. So everybody, once them get a taste of some form of upward mobility, is usually leaving physically from there. So I'll give you that. Maybe they move physically from there, but them heart and mind is still there. Fair. Maybe you can say these artists, maybe them heart and mind is not there. I mean, can't say that because I don't know what it is like to be in the streets, you know? And that is even part of the discussion that I even want to zoom out some more with, is that if you are not from the streets, is it that you want someone to pretend to be from the streets? And it feels like that there has to be this performative exchange. Because, funny, it's like what I say, I look on dancehall. Most dancehall artists and most of the successful dancehall artists, obviously not all of them, they all have to have this badman streets persona. It's a necessary part of the whole aesthetic and sound. Most of them, from my research, you know what I mean, all of the top man, them Cartel, Popcorn, Donia, well, Alka did go in Arden. I don't know if Alka is from the streets. I don't know his history generally. But, you know, just a lot of artists. Valiant, all your favorite artists, Chronic Law, we can name a whole bunch of them. It's pretty established and they put forward that is the streets that them come from. They are being them authentic selves. I would say that there is not this large presence of uptown youths in dancehall. And I know the names that people go to call them, would I say a Sean Paul or a Shaggy. And I would say those people are clearly the minority. You know what I mean? They're not the majority of what makes dancehall. But what I have noticed is that the youths I would understand to, I share their class and they're, them in my class and higher than me. And it's very easy to look at them and say, okay, them are middle class or them are uptown youth, is the producers. You know what I mean? The producers definitely seem like more well off. I don't want to call much names because I don't want to feel like I'm reading off anybody's files, but just look on the crop of producers that are pretty much hot right now. And I think it's very easy if you are Jamaican to say, all right, them youth there, them never come from streets. Them have a streets persona now, but them never come from streets. And again, this is not shade. This is actually me having a conversation as to why does it have to be like this in a way? You know what I mean? We're not trying to erase the streets, but okay, if say me want for the music, me know say a part of my budget have to be in this thing. There is also a rite of passage that you have to go through the street, especially for dancehall, where, you have to take some money and you have to do the rounds. You have to go Boom Sundays, you have to know, say, the selector them, you know what I mean? Because the streets is a very powerful resource in legitimizing dancehall, Not so much reggae. I don't feel like you have to go through that route anymore with reggae, but it's a very necessary part. Okay, you want for the dancehall, you want your juggling rhythm shots, we need to cooperate for your thing to shot here, because a lot of things that will leave the diaspora, a lot of the times that they have to be successful in the street. So that part is not lost on me. So back to this reggae gone uptown thing. When I look at the discussion, a part of it feels like a smoke screen. It doesn't feel completely honest, because it's not like I see that anybody from the streets can do reggae, because I listed some people who don't come from uptown who do reggae. The streets is still very much welcome to make reggae music. And I would add, my own take to this is that I don't feel like the streets is interested in making reggae like one time. I don't get that impression from the streets. I get the impression that the streets is dancehall and dancehall love the streets, and that's what we want to make. We want to make the hype music that get money pull up, money forward, get you all of the girls, all of that stuff. That's what it feels like the streets wants to make. I'm not invalidating anybody, but so we established, say, the streets is still very much so allowed to make reggae. I asked some people even before I recorded this, and I said, is it because of how the people articulate? Some people say yes. And I don't like that. I don't like that frame of mind, to be very honest, because what it says to me is that you're saying because someone articulates themselves well, because they have an education, because of how they carry themselves, them uptown, as if it is a bad thing as well. And I think that is discriminatory, not against uptown people, but even just against what we allow ourselves to believe that education and carrying oneself means. So it means if someone from the streets carries themselves a certain way, speaks a certain way, articulates themselves a certain way, presents their music in a certain way, it means say them uptown. I think that's unfair to the streets, because that's the same type of discrimination where wicked uptown people want to use against people who come from inner city communities, who don't come from uptown communities, who don't come from middle class, that because you speak patois, because you don't carry yourself a certain way, because you present a certain way, it means you're uneducated and not worth X, Y, and Z. And I reiterate that because the people I've listed do not come from traditional uptown areas. Yes, they may have gone to some uptown schools or whatever, but people from the streets also go to uptown schools. So the reason why I'm breaking down this discussion is because I hope you're seeing how intellectually dishonest this thing can become. And if that's the point that is being put forward, I'll leave you with the point and we can agree to disagree, because I don't believe, say, a certain level of articulation is exclusive to any social class. So there may be another argument where them say, is where uptown people listen to reggae, which I would agree. I made a point earlier in the podcast where I'm saying it doesn't feel like the streets wants to make reggae. And there's also a feel where the streets don't want to listen to it. And I can understand maybe if they don't vibe with what is being made now, because music is subjective and people are allowed to like what they like and dislike what they just don't like. But the same is true. If a certain type of music is being made and a certain audience is gravitating to it, whose fault is that? Who is to blame if uptown people gravitate to a certain sound of music? It can be understood that, due to the changes over time, just culturally as well as sonically, that yeah, maybe there have been a lot of integrations of different fusion sounds, as well as, there may be people like, okay, them come from middle class, them come from upper class, even some lower class, they may feel that it is easier for them to consume this music or be in this type of space because reggae currently feels a bit more inclusive to a lot of different types of people. And I know what people are going to say when I say inclusive. They're going to talk about the LGBTQ community. And I don't think it's limited to that. You know what I mean? Reggae is a space where, artists, as in creatives, feel more welcome. People who don't really see themselves as like Batman, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I don't come from the streets. I don't have the Batman aesthetic. You can feel comfortable over reggae. There's just a lot of people, okay, corporate people can feel a little safer over there. It can just feel like a space that is more inclusive. Obviously, it's going to include people from the LGBTQ community. And I would say there's nothing wrong with that because everybody is open to listening to music. And we've reached a point in the present day where there are different types of music throughout the whole entire music chain. People who make music, people produce music, people who write music, people consume music. So this is not a podcast where I'm gonna discriminate against any type of person who wants to be involved in the whole thing. So that's a whole different discussion. But the ultimate thing is, yeah, them feel safe. But the inverse is there's a lot more, to me, there's a lot more events across the board that is playing dancehall. To me, dancehall has penetrated the uptown, you know what I mean? Like someone could have even said, oh, dancehall gone uptown. It wouldn't sound as true because the aesthetic of the modern dancehall artist is fairly similar to its historical look. Whereas it's very clear that the modern reggae artist doesn't necessarily look the same as its historical counterpart. Governor said first, uptown girl them love Batman, and it's very true. You know what I mean? Some of the most uptown people I know, at least millennials and younger, they love dancehall, and there's so many events where dancehall play. So it's like saying, okay, cool, because you have a majority fan base of people uptown. I don't understand what is supposed to, I don't understand what's the problem with that. In closing off this side of the discussion, what I would say to people who are saying that reggae has gone uptown is I would say continue to encourage the streets to make reggae. Good reggae artists, there is evidence that you do not need to be uptown to be a reggae artist. I think I was forgetting one element actually, because you have a subset of artists who make fusion music. And I know a lot of them personally, so I know it's safe for me to kind of speak about them because we have a rapport, meaning we can look upon them in them face and say these things. You may have artists like Tessellated, you may have artists like Zach Jones, you may have artists like maybe a Joby or a Naomi Cowan, whole heap of different artists where people may not see them as traditionally reggae. And even those artists in some ways, they would not see themselves either as traditionally reggae. But again, this binary that we have in Jamaican music, where it's like you need to be A or B. And I say this to even a lot of the musicians in this middle class that is disappearing, that getting somewhere in Jamaica is hard if you don't traditionally do dancehall or if you don't traditionally do reggae, because it's like Jamaica doesn't even know what to do with you. If I'm a manager and an artist don't make dancehall or reggae, is that I say, all right, what station am I gonna put you on? What live show am I gonna put you on? Because live shows are dwindling. Like, which selector can I give this song to try and make it bust in any dance downtown or uptown? Because even our parties follow such a formula, you know what I mean? Reggae, hip hop, early warm, a little 90s dancehall, hot dancehall / soca, you know what I mean? You might breeze off, go to some dancing tune or some hip hop tunes, hot dancehall again, and then we'll wrap up the party with whatever and you go home. You know what I mean? Jamaica has not yet reached a point where we know what to do with hybrid music. And I feel like some of those acts are being targeted when they say reggae gone uptown, because I guess I could say, and I guess even some of those people who are listed, they would know that they would be classified as uptown. Some may identify as middle class or uptown, but they know. And I also feel like I just can't really shake this argument that if someone is just born into a certain class or aesthetic and they decide to make a certain type of music. Why is that such a problem? I just don't understand why it's such a problem. I find it to be more of a problem where someone should be expected to pretend to be something they're not. If me's a middle class youth and my music sound like middle class music, then I don't want to pretend to be like I'm from the streets, because the streets I gotta know. You know what I mean? And I can't pretend to be uptown because them I gotta know. So they're just making, I guess, what seems true to them. And for someone outside to say reggae gone uptown or something, it's just like a lot of those artists that I have listed are literally still trying to, I don't want to say figure out because that sounds reductive, but they are trying to find out what is the ideal audience and the ideal placement for their sound. Because there's not a lot of platforms or homes for music that is not A, dancehall, B, reggae. Anything in the middle is just like, oh, why I make that for? Or why I try do all of that? There's just this big negative reaction to hybrid music. And I don't understand, because there's still people making reggae and there's still people making dancehall. And then there's just some people who are fusing sounds. And apparently there's something so terribly wrong with that. Again, this is a discussion. And I definitely want to hear from people, like what their perspectives are, and do they think the statement is true? Why do they think it's true? You know what I mean? My take, I don't have a problem saying it. I just feel like there are just people who just don't like that group of reggae artists. Like, well, yo, we just don't like you. You know what I mean? Like, uno day or so, and we just don't like you. And if you come to me and say, I just don't like them man there, or I don't like them girl there, I can't argue with you, because you have a right to do that. But I will not be co-opted into being intellectually lazy and say that it gone uptown. There might be more of an uptown feel, but to say that it has left, to me, if you as someone want to say reggae gone uptown, I would also want to say that you are also a part of the problem. Because which reggae artist from the streets you stream recently, or new reggae artists that don't come from uptown, as you said, which one you stream, which one una put from platform, which one una give a chance. List some below if you feel like you guys are championing reggae from the streets, because I know some from the streets, I know some from the streets, but they might have a warm time. It's easier for them to make dancehall and some chopper music, because that will easily go where it needs to go. So that's where I close off on that. Got a little heated right there, but it's only because, as I say, these topics, I'm passionate about them, and I'm passionate about talking about them, and we'll have to apply as much rational thinking and as much real thinking to these things as possible, so that we can have these discussions and try and get to the meat of the matter. Another topic that I feel like I have for today, that is also an offshoot of last week's episode, where we spoke so much about events and, Jamaican events versus my experience in Trinidad. And I wanted to extend that discussion, because we had such a spirited discussion about just how Jamaican events have been feeling lately. And there's something that I've started saying to my friends and my community, and it started after I spent the week in Miami Basel a couple of weeks back, Basel, however you pronounce it. And I went to a couple different genre events, and I just kind of even saw how they approached it, People would be on time. If an event starts at 8, they are in the line from 7. People are ready to go in there. And everybody is trying to get their money's worth at that party. So people in there sweating, partying, at least the parties I went to, People were committing. I came back and I said, We need to be honest about what do we give? What do we give or what do we bring to events? And when I say that, is like you have promoters, you have patrons, and you have everybody else in between, like staff and people who work on events. It's starting with patrons. I feel like a lot of patrons, especially in Jamaica, you buy a ticket to go to a party and you just sit and say, why the party I better mad, This party needs to be amazing. And I've experienced this recently. Went to a party where a group of like 5 people come into Tac Bar and they get a table in the middle of Tac Bar. Half of them have their back turned to the DJ. So the table is a circle and everybody in the group has their elbows leaned on the table. So obviously it's a circle. Some people's backs will be turned to the DJ. And I say, yo, when you pay your money and go into an event and you come into the middle of the event, right in front of the DJ, and you turn your back to the DJ. The MC says, let's get our energy in the place. The MC is trying to encourage the people to lively up themselves, to get an energy. And there's a resistance from these people. I ask myself, why you go into the middle of the event to not want to participate in the event? And that's what I mean. What have you given to this event? Obviously, if you pay for your ticket, and that's a whole nother episode, camp culture. But say you paid for your ticket. Yes, you gave our money to your promoter. You want the party to be worth this money that you have paid. You come into the dance and you start off on the wrong foot. Wouldn't it be better that you don't go to the dance or you go to a low-key bar or you go home? I don't understand where people, they reach at the event with their minds made up that the event is to entertain me. I am going to come here with 0 vibes. Some people come with negative vibes. And it is the party's job to change my vibes from -10 to 100. And I would say that is unfair. It's unfair. People, we must do better. If you have made up your mind to go to an event, worse, if you pay the money for the event, bring something. Bring something. Bring something to give to the event. If there are 100 people in the event, right? And everyone has made up their mind. What? No, man. A party a better shot. Yeah, man, I do nothing, man. A party a better shot, man. What have you given? If everyone has that attitude, everyone comes to then fold their arms and look at the next person, waiting for someone to make a move. We can't do that. Everyone has a role to play. So that is what I mean when I say, what are you giving to the event? Do not come in the party and get a table in the middle of the dance and turn your back to the DJ. You know what I mean? Obviously, you can do that. But I'm saying you contribute. If that party never shot, just know that you contributed to it. You paid your money to support the failure of a party. You know what I mean? It's a different thing if you say, all right, yo, may I go the back? That also doesn't help, but at least you say, all right, cool. The people them with the vibes up at the front, them have the vibes or whatever. But yo, give a little of what you would like to get from the event. You know what I mean? I go to the event and I say, all right, cool. I'm willing to move, willing to jump up, willing to par with my friend them, all of these things. Maybe I may not come with the maximum energy, but if I give some, and my neighbor gives some, my crew gives some, well, I say, no. There's a little vibe. We all have a role to play in the vibe. So people need to give. You know what I mean? But it's not only people, obviously. Promoters have to give as well. And I don't think it stops at yo, I me take my money and put up the party because you are curating an experience. If you want as we say, a shot party, a shot party is not made by trussing and stage. Trussing on stage and that's it, and I have done my job. No, you are curating an experience. So you have a relationship with your patrons because if patrons don't come, you don't have a successful party. If patrons give you a first chance and your party is not good, you don't have a party in the future. So you see that it is what we call a symbiotic relationship. We work together. Promoters know, or how I've seen it is that promoters feel like, all right, I just make the space and I get some DJs and it's up to the patrons to do the rest. And I would encourage promoters to get out of that thinking. You see me? To me, the best promoter is a proper patron, meaning you should try to create the experiences that you also enjoy. So the experiences where you go to the party and you say, yeah, man, I did love the experience of how me enter the party. I did love the DJ selection. I had a good time at the bar. The bathrooms were clean, all of these things. In defense of the promoters, not all promoters have the same budget, so a promoter that is trying to put on an event reasonably so, the promoter that has $100, their event has to do things different from the promoter that has $1,000. Maybe the promoter said, okay, I can't have luxe bathrooms, but I definitely want there to be a smooth bar. There may be things that they have to choose one or the other based on the budget that they have to execute this event. These patrons who are buying tickets, they should have an understanding of what they can expect based on the cost of the ticket. All right, cool, I paid $2,000 for this event. I know what I can kind of expect from a $2,000 event versus an event that costs $15,000. The critique, I think, definitely should be in relation to what one had to invest into the event. But back to the promoters. What I would say to some promoters, especially right now, is that there is a very blasé approach to the curation of the vibe, I think a lot of promoters are getting better at, the location, the bathroom, the entry, like the soft part of the experience, which needed some work. So we have to congratulate first before we cuss. You know what I mean? Definitely see improvement there. But the vibe, and the vibe is not just the DJs who playing. The vibe is, okay, what DJs is one? Who are the MCs? What is the theme, if any? And, the people. Obviously you can't control fully who the people are, but you do have some control. So what I'd say is that when these people or promoters are hiring DJs, sometimes I don't feel like there is a hands-on or even a intentional approach of how do I want the vibe to progress through the night. This is the kind of vibe I want from this time to this time, this time to this time, to this time to this time. I also find that, I guess it's part of stress management, but promoters are not, it doesn't, like one time I don't feel like they're also, as DJs should, being in tune with how the audience is feeling. Because another kind of worms, a lot of people complaining about MCs and how much time they spend on the mic, what they say on the mic, and how DJs are playing. You know what I mean? And I don't think that everybody can just be lying. I would say Jamaicans and all Jamaicans who are listening, Jamaicans are a very unreasonable crowd to please, especially for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, because Jamaicans, especially Kingstonians, have a resistance to contributing to the vibe of the event. I don't want to dance. I don't want to be perceived. I don't want to reach early. I don't want to turn up. I don't want to have fun. So while you hear me I talk to the promoters, I'm also talking to you. We are a hard audience to deal with. But as I say, promoters still need to check in with their audience to see how things are going and have a relationship with the DJs in terms of this is what I want to hear. I'm liking what I'm hearing. I'm not liking what I'm hearing. The audience, I'm not liking the vibe. Can we pivot? X, Y, Z. You know, listen to the things that your patrons want. Okay, we like this DJ because of this, that. We don't like this DJ because of this, that. Because I believe there are musical talents based on the type of party. Because a street dance is not the same as a soca party. And a soca party is not the same as a reggae dance. So I feel like there are DJs and MCs who understand these different types of events better than others and slot into those events better than others. And some techniques that satisfy one type of event may upset another type of event. Even if, okay, promoter themselves not directly doing the musical curation, just make sure someone is in charge of that. We can definitely improve in that area of I am very hands-on in how I want my party to feel. Very hands-on in how I want my party to sound. Like the vibe, promoters need to be a lot more responsible for it as opposed to the party keep and money make. Like on the night, who is playing, what's the vibe like? Also, please pay attention to the post-event review and pay attention to the post-event review, especially from the people who paid for their ticket. I'm saying this as someone who enough ticket I don't pay for. So enough event, especially if I get the ticket free, I'm not going online and complaining because I'm saying, you know what? We never pay for this, you know. So maybe the people who pay for it like it. But especially the people who see the product that you put up and say, you know what? I'm going to pay for this party because I rate this product. It is very keen to take their feedback into consideration. Not all feedback is good feedback, of course, but if you see 90 people say something, at least say, all right, make sure we have it. I think we have, both as patrons and promoters, we have a large responsibility as it pertains to our entertainment. How we feel about the events that we go to and the stuff, you know what I mean? The performers we book, you know, how long the performers are on stage for. Is this artist suitable for this event and stuff like that? Promoters go in the dance and go par and go see how the people them feel. Get an idea of how the thing is on the ground. You know what I mean? When I was keeping events, I love to go through the gate. Sometimes I would pay for a ticket at my own event to say, all right, let me see how the security guard going. And I try and buy a drink at my own bar. And mind you, sometimes these suppliers don't know that I am one of the promoters. You know what I mean? I go and stand up and hold a vibe someplace. We go try buy a drink, see how long it take. You know what I mean? All of these things. So then when we as a organization come together to do our postmortem, I can say, boy, well, I went through the gate and it did kind of dark. I see some stone or, yo, it did take really long for me get some drinks. I know. So even if I even see a take online, I'm going to say, that's a lie because I was there. You know what I mean? It would be good to know that some promoters, them just they're in a VIP all event. You know what I mean? And that's fine if you have people who are doing it for you, but make sure the people them are actually doing it. Make sure there's someone who can give you a report about how bar felt to patrons, how the performance felt to patrons, how was the sound to patrons, how was the entrance to patrons, and not just from the promoter perspective, because your experience will obviously be completely different if you're standing in the back of VIP, like say you're the king of the dance. Patrons, we don't talk to no. Give something to the event, man. You see me? Pay for the ticket if you can pay for the ticket. If you don't pay for the ticket, you can reach early. Give the promoter a little vibes. Come and contribute and say, yo, come on, stand up near the DJ and turn up, yeah. Come on, give them a little energy. You know what I mean? And if everybody took on that, like, come on, give them a little energy. You build up a little vibes here. Your neighbor say, hey, like your vibes. And then everybody's contributing to the success of the event. You go home, you say, no, man, that party was so sick. We need to go to that party again. And I find the events that feel like a surefire hit in that way are events where I feel like the patrons come with an energy, like they come to give something to the event, as well as the patron, the promoters have curated something, you know, a meeting in the middle. You know what I mean? You come for turn up, we ready for you, come for turn up. You see me? And they come together, and those are the events where when them pre-sold their forward, I say, yo, let me get one of those. I think those are the two niche topics. I don't think we need to go on a third because those two are so substantial. I think there's a lot of time for us to have a discussion about them and continue the discussion. Viewers can see that I am not in my home office. I'm currently working overseas. I'm on tour. So I found the time to get a space where I can make sure that I record this episode for all of the people who are expecting it. For audio listeners, I'm not at home. But the feedback from the first episode was so positive. I found it imperative to take the time out to ensure that we maintain a level of consistency and further the conversation and further the community. So if there's anything that's a little bit off in terms of sound or visuals, you can still let me know, but also give me some grace because I'm not working from home. Thank you so much for your support this far. If you've reached to the end of the podcast, I want to say thank you again. Taking the time out to listen to me talk with and yap at y'all. I don't take it for granted. And as I say, I'm always going to do my best to make sure that it is indeed worth your time. You know where to find the podcast, but you can tell a friend that it is on Spotify, it's on Google, wherever you get podcasts, especially on YouTube. If you can like the video, that helps a whole lot. If you can go and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, that also helps a whole lot. If you can share the clips and the YouTube videos with others, that helps us to grow the community. That helps us to get more minds into these discussions. And that just helps us as a diaspora to elevate the discussions that we have about our culture. And my ultimate hope is that, you know, we have wholesome discussions where that actually lead to change within the cultural and creative community amongst the diaspora. So I just want to say thanks again to everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And yeah, just go and hold a vibe and continue to bless up yourself.